twilight's crimson glow filtered through the massive crystalline windows of the Grand Hall, bathing King Draxiur's throne in blood-red light. The throne room of the Cydric dynasty stretched impossibly high, its ceiling adorned with murals depicting the many conquests of their people. Towering obsidian pillars lined the hall, each one carved with ancient symbols of power that seemed to pulse with a life of their own in the dying light. King Draxiur sat motionless, his angular features cast in shadow, fingers drumming against the armrest of his throne. The sound echoed across the chamber, a methodical rhythm that matched the beating hearts of the nervous attendants who stood in perfect formation below. "Bring in the human," he commanded, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The massive doors at the far end of the hall swung open. 2 royal guards entered, dragging between them a figure that appeared small by comparison. A human male, his military uniform torn and bloodied, yet his posture remained surprisingly straight despite the restraints binding his wrists. "So this is what the Earth Alliance sends to challenge us." King Draxiur's lips curved into a cruel smile. A lone soldier, barely worthy of notice. The human, Arion, according to the intelligence reports, said nothing. His eyes, a striking steel blue, scanned the hall methodically, taking in details with a calculated precision that did not escape the king's notice. "Do you know why you're still alive, human?" Draxiur leaned forward, his massive frame casting an even longer shadow across the polished floor. "Your ship was destroyed, your squadron eliminated. Yet here you stand." Arion remained silent, his gaze now fixed directly on the king. "I want your people to understand something," Draxiur continued, rising from his throne. "I want them to witness how pathetically weak they truly are, how easily broken." He descended the steps toward Arion, his footfalls echoing like thunder throughout the hall. The king stopped, towering over the human, and yet, peculiarly, Arion's gaze never wavered. "Summon Valorissa," Draxiur ordered without looking away from his prisoner. A hush fell over the hall. Even the guards stiffened at the mention of that name. Minutes later, the side entrance to the hall opened, and a tall, imposing figure entered. Her black armor absorbed the crimson light rather than reflecting it, making her appear as though she were carved from shadow itself. 2 swords hung at her hips, legendary weapons that had tasted the blood of 1,000 opponents. Her face was partially obscured by her helmet, but her eyes were visible, cold, calculating, undefeated. "My king," Valorissa spoke, her voice carrying across the hall without effort. "You summoned me." King Draxiur gestured toward Arion. "This human was captured during our orbital assault. Tomorrow, in the royal arena, you will break him." The king's smile widened. "Break his body, break his spirit, make an example of human weakness for all to see." Valorissa, Val to those few who dared claim friendship with her, studied the human briefly. "It will be quick, my king. He won't survive the first strike." "No." Draxiur's voice hardened. "Not quick. I want him to suffer first. I want his people to see what awaits them should they continue to resist." Val approached Arion, circling him like a predator. The human's eyes followed her, not with fear, but with assessment. This irritated her. "You won't survive a single blow," she said quietly, for his ears only. Arion finally spoke, his voice surprisingly steady. "We shall see." Val's eyes narrowed at the unexpected response. She turned back to the king and bowed. "As you command." Tomorrow, the human falls. King Draxiur returned to his throne, satisfied. "Prepare the arena. Send word throughout the palace. I want every noble, every officer, every servant to witness this demonstration." As the guards dragged Arion away, Val caught a final glimpse of the human's face. There was something in his expression that troubled her. Not resignation or fear, but a steady resolve that seemed out of place for someone facing certain death. She dismissed the thought. By this time tomorrow, that resolve would be shattered along with his bones. The royal arena was ancient, carved deep within the mountain upon which the palace was built. Its circular design focused all attention on the center stage, where countless lives have been claimed for sport and punishment throughout the centuries. Today, every tier was packed with spectators. Military officers in their formal attire, nobles draped in expensive fabrics, servants and palace staff crowded along the highest levels. Arion was led into the arena through the prisoner's gate, his steps measured despite the jeers and mockery raining down from the audience. His prison garments were little more than rags, offering no protection. The guards removed his restraints, leaving him standing alone in the center of the arena with nothing but a short spear, a crude weapon compared to what he would face. A horn sounded, silencing the crowd. King Draxier entered his royal viewing box to thunderous applause. He raised a hand, and when silence fell again, his voice carried to every corner of the arena. Today, we demonstrate the futility of human resistance. Their so-called champion stands before you. Let his defeat serve as a message to all who would challenge the Sci-Fi dynasty. The eastern gate opened, and Val emerged. The crowd erupted in cheers as Valorissa stepped into the arena. Her armor, polished to a mirror sheen, reflected the arena's harsh lighting in flashes that dazzled the eye. Her legendary sword was already drawn, its edge catching the light with a hungry gleam. She moved with fluid confidence, each step a testament to decades of martial perfection. Val approached the center of the arena, taking her position opposite Arion. Close up, she noticed details she had missed in the throne room. The way he balanced his weight, the careful positioning of his hands on the spear, the focused intensity in his eyes. For the briefest moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but she banished it immediately. Begin! The king's command echoed throughout the arena. Val didn't hesitate. She launched forward with blinding speed, her sword arcing toward Arion's chest in a strike that had ended countless lives. It was her opening move, designed not for a clean kill, but to demonstrate her overwhelming superiority. But her blade met only air. Arion had shifted, impossibly fast, just enough for the sword to miss him by inches. The crowd gasped collectively, their jeers momentarily silenced. Val recovered instantly, pivoting to strike again. Once more, Arion evaded, his movements economical and precise. He made no attempt to counterattack, focusing entirely on survival. For nearly a minute, the pattern continued. Val's attacks growing increasingly forceful, Arion's evasions remaining frustratingly effective. The crowd's initial shock gave way to murmurs of concern. This was not the quick execution they had expected. "Fight back, coward!" Val growled, her composure beginning to crack beneath mounting frustration. Arion remained silent, his breathing controlled despite the exertion. His eyes never left hers, tracking her every movement. Waiting, Val launched a complex combination attack, an overhead strike followed by a low sweep designed to catch opponents between defenses. It was a sequence that had never failed her. Arion parried the overhead strike with his spear, the impact sending vibrations through both weapons. As Val's blade swept low, he leaped over it, bringing his spear down in the same motion. The crude weapon found a gap in Val's armor, a small joint connecting her shoulder guard to her breastplate. The force of the strike wasn't enough to penetrate deeply, but it cracked the protective plate and sent Val stumbling backward. Absolute silence fell over the arena. Val stared in disbelief at the damaged section of her armor. A piece of the black plating had broken away, revealing the underlying mesh. It wasn't a serious injury, but in 10 years of combat, no opponent had ever managed to damage her legendary armor. Her gaze lifted to Arion, who had already resumed his defensive stance, spear at the ready. The silence broke as King Draxier rose from his seat, face contorted with rage. "What are you doing?" he shouted at Val. "Do not let that pathetic creature make a mockery of you. Finish him. Now." The crowd began to chant, calling for Arion's blood. But beneath their cries, Val could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Uncertainty where certainty had reigned just moments before. She attacked again, her movements more controlled now, more cautious. Arion continued to defend, but she noticed he was tiring. No matter his skill, he was still human, still limited by human endurance. They circled each other, exchanging strikes and parries. Val pressed her advantage of superior strength and armor. Yet each time she thought she had him, Arion would find some way to slip from her grasp. "Why do you persist?" she asked during a brief pause. "You cannot win." Arion's response was calm despite his heavy breathing. Winning and surviving are not always the same thing. Something about his words struck Val, but before she could dwell on it, King Draxier's voice thundered across the arena. "Enough of this display. Valorissa, end this now, or face my displeasure." Val nodded, readying herself for a final, decisive assault. She would finish this with her signature move, a feint followed by a thrust that no shield or armor could stop. She charged, executing the feint perfectly. Arion, as expected, moved to defend against the apparent attack. Val smiled beneath her helmet, pivoting for the true strike that would end this farce. But Arion had anticipated her. As she committed to the final thrust, he twisted, allowing her blade to pass, just alongside his ribs. In that moment of overextension, he drove his spear into another weak point in her armor, the flexible joint at her waist. The impact knocked Val off balance. She stumbled, fell to one knee, and a large section of her armored plating broke free, clattering to the ground with a sound that seemed to echo forever in the stunned arena. Val knelt there, breathing hard, staring at the broken piece of her armor, the physical manifestation of her shattered pride. Never in her life had she been brought to her knees in combat. Never had her legendary armor failed her. The crowd was speechless. King Draxier stood rigid with fury. "Kill that worthless human now," he roared. "No more games. No more displays. End him." Val rose slowly, her eyes locked with Arion's. For the first time, she truly saw him, not as a weak human to be crushed, but as a worthy opponent. And in his eyes, she saw not contempt for her failure, but simple determination to survive. Something shifted inside her, a piece falling out of place like the fragment of her broken armor. The horn sounded again, signaling a brief pause in the combat. Val retreated to her side of the arena, mind racing. She had underestimated the human, yes, but she would not make that mistake again. When combat resumed, she would end this quickly, as she should have from the beginning. Yet, as she prepared herself, a voice in the back of her mind whispered a troubling question. If she had been wrong about his weakness, what else might she be wrong about? When the horn sounded again, Val approached the center with renewed determination. Her pride was wounded, her armor damaged, but her resolve was intact. This time, she would show no mercy. Arion stood waiting, his stance betraying his exhaustion. He had given everything to survive the first round, and both of them knew it. "You fought well," Val said, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear. "But it ends now." King Draxier's voice cut through the arena once more. "No more words. Crush him. Break his spirit for all to see." Val lunged forward, her attacks faster and more aggressive than before. Anger fueled her strikes. Anger at being embarrassed, at having her invincibility questioned. Arion defended desperately, but his movements were slowing. A glancing blow caught his arm, drawing blood. The crowd roared their approval. Val pressed her advantage, driving Arion back. Another strike tore through his thin garment, leaving a shallow cut across his ribs. He stumbled, nearly falling. "Finish him." The king's command was unnecessary. Val was already moving for the killing blow, her sword aimed at Arion's heart. In that moment, Arion found one last burst of energy. He deflected her blade, just enough to avoid a fatal wound, though the edge still cut across his shoulder. The force of his parry caused Val to momentarily lose balance. It was the opening Arion had been waiting for. He thrust his spear forward in a perfect strike aimed at Val's exposed neck, a killing blow. But inches from its target, he stopped. Val froze, feeling the spear's point hovering just above her throat. She could see Arion's hands trembling with exertion, his breathing ragged. He could end her life with the slightest pressure. Instead, he withdrew the weapon and stepped back. The arena fell into shocked silence. "I am not here to kill," Arion said, his voice carrying across the silent space. "I'm here to show you that we are not weak. Strength isn't measured by how many you destroy, but by the principles you uphold, even when it would be easier not to." Val stared at him, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He had spared her. Given the chance to kill his captor, his tormentor, he had chosen mercy. Why? The question echoed in her mind as King Draxier's outraged voice cut through her thoughts. "This mockery ends now." The king stood, his face contorted with fury. "Guards, seize them both. The human dies, and this traitor with him." Armored guards poured into the arena from every entrance, weapons drawn. They surrounded Arion and Val, closing in from all sides. Val looked at the approaching guards. Men and women she had trained with fought alongside. They hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the order to attack their champion. In that moment, clarity struck her like a physical blow. Everything she had believed in, the rightness of their conquests, the weakness of their enemies, the honor in serving King Draxa, suddenly seemed hollow. "He deserves a warrior's death," Val called out, her voice ringing with authority. "He defeated me fairly. There is no honor in executing him like this. You dare defy me?" King Draxier's voice trembled with rage. "After all I have given you? After raising you above all others? Guards, take them." The guards hesitated, their loyalty divided. Some advanced, weapons ready. Others held back, watching Val for guidance. "This is wrong," Val declared, louder now. "The human fought with honor. He spared my life when he could have taken it. Is this how we repay honor? With treachery?" Arion stood at her side, watching the unfolding drama with quiet intensity. One of the guards, Elias, Val's lieutenant for many years, stepped forward. "Commander," he said, his voice tight with tension, "what would you have us do?" The question hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. Val looked around at the faces of her soldiers, then at Arion, then finally up at King Draca, whose fury seemed to distort his very features. She made her decision. "Stand down," she ordered the guard approaching them. "This combat is over. The human fought with honor and will be treated with honor." "Traitor!" Draxier's scream echoed throughout the arena. "Kill them. Kill them both." Chaos erupted. Some guards charged forward, loyal to the king. Others moved to Val's side, forming a protective circle around her and Arion. The crowd panicked, some fleeing, others watching in horrified fascination. "This way," Val said to Arion, gesturing toward one of the arena exits. Elias and several loyal guards cleared a path, engaging the king's forces just long enough for Val and Arion to slip through. They ran through dark corridors beneath the arena, the sounds of combat fading behind them. Val led the way, navigating the labyrinthine passages with practiced ease. Finally, they reached a small chamber used for storing equipment. "We'll be safe here for a while," Val said, barring the door behind them. For the first time since their bizarre partnership began, they truly looked at each other. Two enemies now allied by circumstance, both breathing hard, both uncertain of what came next. "Why did you spare me?" Val asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since that moment in the arena. Arion leaned against the wall, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Killing you wouldn't have proven anything. It would only have reinforced the cycle of violence that brought us here. But I would have killed you." "Yes," he agreed simply. And that's the difference the king doesn't understand. The distant sounds of shouting and running footsteps reached them, reminding them of their precarious situation. "They'll be searching everywhere," Val said, removing her damaged helmet. Without it, her features were striking. Sharp cheekbones, intense golden eyes, dark hair, cropped short for battle. "We need a plan. Why did you defend me?" Arion asked. "You could have followed orders. Kept your position. Your life." Val was silent for a long moment. "Because you were right," she finally said. "And he was wrong. It's taken me too long to see it." The confession hung between them, the beginning of something neither quite understood yet. In a maze of neglected tunnels beneath the royal palace, Val and Arion found temporary sanctuary. The ancient passages, once used by servants to move unseen throughout the massive complex, have been largely forgotten as newer, more efficient routes were established. Val sat with her back against the cool stone wall, her damaged armor removed and stacked beside her. Without it, she looked smaller, more vulnerable, though the hard muscle of her arms and the scars that mapped her skin spoke of her warrior's life. Arion sat across from her, his wounds bandaged with strips torn from his already ragged clothing. Despite his injuries and exhaustion, his eyes remained alert, mind clearly working through their options. "Your people," Val began, breaking the long silence. "What are they really like?" Arion studied her, as if weighing how much to share. "Diverse. Complicated. Like yours, I imagine. Some warlike, some peaceful, some wise, some foolish. But your military is weak compared to ours. In numbers and technology, yes," Arion admitted. "But we're adaptive, resourceful. I've seen that firsthand," Val said with a hint of reluctant respect. Arion leaned forward slightly. "What about you? Have you always served King Draxia?" Val's expression darkened. "Since I was old enough to hold a sword. The Royal Military Academy identified me as promising. I was trained, promoted, given command. I believed in our superiority, our right to conquer." She paused, looking at her hands. "I never questioned it. Until today." "What changed?" "You showed mercy," she said simply. "In all my years of combat, across a dozen worlds, I've never seen that. It made me realize how empty our victories have been, how hollow our supposed strength." The sound of footsteps echoed from a distant tunnel, and both warriors tensed, hands moving to weapons. The steps faded, moving away from their hiding place. "We can't stay here forever," Arion said quietly. "No," Val agreed. "But where can we go? The entire palace will be searching for us." Before Arion could respond, a faint scratching came from a side passage. Val motioned for silence, drawing her sword. The scratching came again, followed by a whispered voice. "Commander? Are you there?" Val relaxed slightly, recognizing the voice. "Elias." The figure of her lieutenant emerged from the shadows, followed by 3 other soldiers. All wore the elite guard uniform, though they had removed their royal insignias. "Thank the stars," Elias said, relief evident in his voice. "We've been searching these tunnels for hours." "Report," Val commanded, falling back on military protocol. "The king has declared you both traitors. There's a massive search underway, but it's chaos. Half the guard follows his orders, half are hesitating, waiting to see what you'll do." Val absorbed this information. "What about you? Why are you here?" Elias straightened. "We serve Commander Valerissa, not King Draxior's madness." The other soldiers nodded in agreement. "Madness?" Arion asked. Elias glanced at the human, then back to Val. "Permission to speak freely, Commander?" Val nodded. "The king's cruelty has been growing worse for years. The endless conquests, the public executions, the brutality toward anyone who questions his decisions. Many of us have served loyally, believing we were building a strong empire, but—" He hesitated. "But it's become tyranny," one of the other soldiers finished. "How widespread is this feeling?" Val asked. "More widespread than the king knows," Elias replied. "Your stand in the arena today, it gave voice to doubts many already harbored." Arion watched this exchange with interest. "You're saying there could be support for a change in leadership?" Elias looked at him directly. "There could be, yes. Especially with Commander Val leading it." Val shook her head. "I'm a soldier, not a revolutionary." "Sometimes they're the same thing," Arion said quietly. The group fell silent, the weight of possibility hanging in the air. "We need more information," Val finally said. "And allies. Elias, your team should return to the palace, gauge the true extent of support, identify potential allies among the officer corps." "And what of you, Commander?" Val glanced at Arion. "We'll relocate. These tunnels aren't secure enough. There's an abandoned garrison in the eastern quadrant. We'll establish a temporary base there." "And then?" Arion asked. Val's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we plan King Draxior's removal from power." Hours later, As they carefully made their way through the ancient tunnel system, Arion spoke again. You realize what you're doing, don't you? There's no going back from this. Val didn't slow her pace or turn around. I know. Why risk everything for a cause that isn't yours? For an enemy you were ordered to kill. Now she did stop, turning to face him in the dim light. Perhaps it became my cause the moment I realized everything I believed in was built on cruelty and lies. She paused. Besides, you spare my life. I owe you a debt. You don't, Arion said immediately. That's not why I did it. Then why did you? Because that's who we are, he said simply. At our best, anyway. We value life, even the lives of our enemies. Val studied him for a long moment. Perhaps your people aren't as weak as we thought. Strength takes many forms, Arion replied. Something I think you're beginning to understand. They continued their journey through the tunnels. Two former enemies now united by shared understanding and a common goal. One that would change a kingdom forever. The eastern garrison had indeed been abandoned, left to gather dust when newer, more strategic facilities were built closer to the palace. Its location, partially embedded in the mountain face, overlooking the sprawling capital city below, offered both security and a vantage point. Over the next 2 days, Val and Arion established their base of operations. Elias and other loyal soldiers discreetly brought supplies, information, and eventually more allies. The makeshift rebellion grew slowly but steadily. On the third night, Val stood on the garrison's observation deck, watching the palace gleam in the distance. Arion joined her, his wounds healing but still evident in his careful movements. Elias reports that 23 officers have pledged support, Arion said, and nearly 200 soldiers. Not enough, Val replied grimly. Not against the royal guard, but significant nonetheless. More join every hour. Val nodded, her expression thoughtful. I've commanded armies, led invasions of entire planets. But this... She shook her head. I've never felt less certain. Because you've always fought for someone else's cause, Arion suggested. Now you're fighting for your own. And what cause is that exactly? Val asked, turning to face him. Justice, Arion said simply. The right of people to live without tyranny. Val almost smiled. You make it sound so noble, isn't it? She looked back toward the palace. What if I'm doing this for the wrong reasons? What if this is just about my wounded pride? My anger at Draxier for treating me like a disposable tool after years of loyal service. Does it matter? Arion asked. If the outcome is the same? If people are freed from his cruelty? Val considered this. Perhaps not, but matters to me. I need to know that I haven't simply replaced one form of blindness with another. Arion was silent for a moment. When I spared your life in the arena, it wasn't just principle. It was also because I saw something in you, a potential for change that Draxier doesn't have. And how could you possibly know that? The same way you knew some of your soldiers would stand with you against him. We recognized something in each other, even across the lines that divide us. Before Val could respond, Elias appeared at the entrance to the observation deck. Commander, he said urgently, we've received word from the palace. King Draxier has ordered public executions for tomorrow. 30 soldiers suspected of supporting you. He's making an example of them. Val's expression hardened. Then our timeline has changed. We moved tonight. The next hour was a blur of preparation. Maps were studied, weapons distributed, communications established with allies inside the palace. The plan was risky but direct. A three-pronged infiltration of the palace using the ancient tunnel system, targeting the throne room during the king's evening council meeting. Just before they departed, Val gathered their forces, now nearly 50 strong, in the garrison's main hall. Tonight, we face a choice, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. Continue serving a tyrant who sees us as tools for his ambition, or stand for something more. I won't pretend this will be easy. Many of you may not survive, but those who do will help build something better than what we've known. She looked around at the faces before her, soldiers she had trained with, fought alongside, people who now risked everything based on her word. I ask only one thing. Remember why we fight. Not for power, not for vengeance, but for the right to serve with honor. Her gaze found Arion, standing quietly at the back of the room. In the days since the arena, his presence had transformed from that of an enemy to something else, an ally, a conscience, perhaps even a friend. "Let's move out," she ordered. They infiltrated the palace through 3 separate entry points, using the ancient service tunnels that Val and Arion had navigated days earlier. Security was heavy, but with inside help from sympathetic guards, they advanced steadily toward the central keep where the king held his council. Val led the main assault group, with Arion at her side. They moved through shadowed corridors, neutralizing loyal guards when necessary, but avoiding bloodshed where possible. "The council chamber is just ahead," Val whispered as they reached a final junction. 20 meters around that corner. Arion nodded, tension evident in every line of his body. "Guards, at least 6 at the main entrance," she replied. "But we have the element of surprise." Before they could advance, the sound of armored footsteps approached from a side corridor. Val signaled for the team to take cover. Around the corner marched General Thorn, Draxier's newly appointed champion, the man who had replaced Val. He was escorted by 4 elite guards, all heavily armed. "New complication," Arion muttered. Val's expression darkened. "Thorn is mine." "Val," Arion cautioned, "remember why we're here. This isn't about personal vendettas." She knew he was right, but the sight of Thorn, wearing the ceremonial armor that had once been hers, awakened a primal anger she couldn't entirely suppress. "We need to move," Elias urged. "The other teams will be in position." Val made her decision. "Change of plan. Elias, take half the squad and proceed to the council chamber. Create a diversion, draw out the guards. Arion and I will deal with Thorn, then join you." Elias hesitated only briefly before nodding. "As you command." As Elias led his group away, Arion gave Val a questioning look. "Are you sure about this?" "Thorn is dangerous," she said firmly. "Better to neutralize him now than face him in the throne room alongside Drax." Arion seemed unconvinced but readied his weapon, a proper sword now, rather than the crude spear from the arena. They waited until Thorn and his escort passed their position, then emerged silently behind them. Val's whistle, a signal they had practiced, caused the guard to turn just as Elias's diversion exploded at the far end of the corridor. Flash grenades and the sound of shouting. Confusion reigned for precious seconds. Val launched herself at Thorn while Arion engaged the escorts. The confined space of the corridor worked to their advantage, preventing the guards from surrounding them. Thorn recovered quickly, his sword meeting Val's with a clash that echoed through the passage. "Traitor," he spat, his face contorted with hatred. "Loyal to what matters," Val countered, pressing her attack. Their duel was brutal and swift. Thorn was skilled. Val had trained him herself, but his technique was predictable. He fought as she once had, with absolute confidence in his superiority. That same confidence had been her undoing in the arena, and now it would be his. Val feinted, drawing Thorn into an aggressive lunge. As he committed, she pivoted exactly as Arion had done against her, letting Thorn's momentum carry him past. Her blade found the same weak point in his armor that Arion had exploited in hers. Thorn fell wounded but alive. Val stood over him, sword raised for a killing blow. "Val!" Arion's voice cut through her focus. He had subdued 2 of the escorts. The others had fled. "We need to move. Now." She hesitated, looking down at Thorn. How easy it would be to end him, to eliminate a dangerous enemy. "This isn't who you are anymore," Arion said more quietly, closer now. Val lowered her sword. She knelt quickly, removing Thorn's weapon and communication device. "Consider yourself fortunate," she told him. "Not long ago, I wouldn't have hesitated." They secured Thorn and the subdued guards, then rushed toward the council chamber where sounds of conflict already echoed. Elias's team had engaged the chamber guards, creating the perfect distraction. Val and Arion slipped through a servant's entrance, emerging into the massive council room from an unexpected direction. King Draxier sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by his advisors and several elite guards. His face twisted with rage when he saw Val and Arion enter. "Kill them," he roared, rising from his chair. "Kill them now." The guards moved to obey, but they were caught between Elias's forces entering from the main door and Val's group. In the ensuing chaos, Draxiur's advisors scattered, seeking cover or escape. Draxiur himself drew a ceremonial weapon, an energy blade passed down through generations of Cydric rulers. Its crimson glow illuminated his features, transforming them into something almost demonic. "I raised you from nothing," he snarled at Val as she approached. "Made you my champion. And this is how you repay me? With treachery? With alliance to our enemy?" "You raised me to believe in strength," Val replied, circling cautiously. "But now I see that what you call strength is merely cruelty. What you call loyalty is simply fear." Draxiur attacked with surprising speed for one who spent more time on a throne than in combat. His energy blade hummed through the air, leaving trails of light in its wake. Val parried, the impact sending shockwaves up her arm. Around them, the battle between loyalists and rebels continued, but a space had cleared around the king and his former champion, as if by unspoken agreement that this confrontation was the heart of the conflict. Arion fought his way through the melee, dispatching a guard who tried to intervene. He reached Val's side just as Draxiur launched another furious assault. Together, they faced the king's onslaught. Draxiur fought with the desperation of a man who knew everything was at stake. His blade sliced through a pillar when Val ducked, sending stone fragments exploding across the room. "You cannot win," Draxiur panted, his attacks becoming more erratic. "Even if you kill me, the dynasty will hunt you to the edges of the galaxy. Both of you." "Perhaps," Arion replied, deflecting a strike aimed at his chest. "But your reign ends today." Their coordinated attack pushed Draxiur back step by step. Val recognized the fear growing in his eyes, the same fear she had seen in countless opponents before they fell. Despite his power, despite his position, Draxiur was just another warrior facing defeat. With a desperate cry, Draxiur unleashed a sweeping attack that forced both Val and Arion to leap backward. The energy blade carved a glowing arc through the air, buying the king precious seconds to retreat toward his throne. "Coward!" Val called after him. "Face us." Draxiur reached the elevated platform where his throne sat. He slammed his hand against a hidden panel, and a force shield shimmered into existence around him. "You think this is about courage?" He laughed, his voice distorted by the energy field. "This is about power. It always has been." He activated another control, and alarms blared throughout the palace. "My personal guard will be here in moments. Hundreds of them. Your pitiful rebellion ends now." Val glanced around the chamber. Most of Draxiur's council guards had been subdued, but Elias was wounded, and several of their fighters had fallen. They couldn't withstand reinforcements. "We need to shut down that shield," she said to Arion. Arion nodded, his eyes scanning the room. The power source there. He pointed to a series of conduits running along the ceiling, converging at a junction box near the throne. Val understood immediately. She turned to Elias. "Secure the exits. Buy us time." Elias nodded, gathering the remaining fighters to establish defensive positions. Val and Arion circled the throne platform, staying just beyond the shield's perimeter. Draxiur watched them with contemptuous amusement. "The control for the shield generator," Val murmured to Arion. "They're behind the throne. One of us needs to get to them." "Distraction," Arion suggested. Val nodded. "On my mark." She moved to directly face Draxiur, commanding his attention. "Your reign is over," she called out. "The people know your weakness now." "My weakness?" Draxiur snarled. "I have no weakness." "You fear them," Val continued, gesturing toward the soldiers who had followed her. "You fear their loyalty to something greater than yourself. You fear what I discovered in that arena, that true strength comes from principle, not power." As she spoke, Arion moved quietly to the side, positioning himself beneath the junction box. Draxiur's face contorted with rage. "I fear nothing. I am a king. I am the embodiment of the Cydric dynasty." Now, Val whispered. She hurled her blade directly at the shield, creating a brilliant flash as energy met energy. In the same instant, Arion leaped upward, catching a decorative outcropping and pulling himself toward the conduits. His sword slashed through them, sending sparks cascading down. The shield flickered and died. Draxier barely had time to register what had happened before Val was upon him, her secondary blade at his throat. "Surrender," she demanded. For a moment, it seemed Draxier might comply. Then, with a roar of defiance, he activated his energy blade again, swinging it toward Val's head. She ducked beneath the attack, driving her shoulder into his midsection. They crashed together against the throne, toppling it from its platform in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Arion dropped down from his position, rushing to assist. But Val was already gaining the upper hand, her superior combat training evident as she forced Draxier's blade arm to the ground. "It's over," she said, her own weapon poised to strike. Draxier glared up at her, hatred burning in his eyes. "Then finish it," he spat. "Prove you're just like me. Prove that power is all that matters in the end." Val's blade trembled slightly. How many times had she killed without hesitation in this man's name? How simple it would be to end him now, to ensure he could never threaten them again. She felt Arion's presence beside her, not interfering, but watching, waiting to see what choice she would make. Val lowered her blade. "No," she said quietly. "I'm nothing like you, and I never will be again." She rose to her feet, gesturing for two soldiers to secure the king. "Draxier of the Sci-Fi dynasty, you are hereby removed from power for crimes against your own people and countless others." The king's laughter was bitter as they bound his hands. "You think this changes anything? You think they'll follow you now? A traitor and a human?" Before Val could respond, the main doors to the chamber burst open. They all turned, weapons ready, expecting the king's guard. Instead, a diverse group entered. Officers, nobles, and citizens, led by members of the royal council. "The palace is secure," announced an elderly counselor, her gaze taking in the scene before her. Most of the royal guard has stood down. She looked directly at Val. "We received your message. We've been waiting for someone to take action against Draxier's tyranny." Val stared in surprise. The message she had sent through Elias had reached further than she'd hoped. "What happens now?" Arion asked quietly. The counselor stepped forward. "Now we rebuild. Without conquest. Without cruelty." She turned to Val. "Will you help us?" Val looked around the chamber, at her loyal soldiers, at the council members who had hidden their dissent until this moment, at Draxier kneeling in defeat, and finally at Arion, whose unexpected mercy in the arena had set everything in motion. "Yes," she said firmly, "but not alone." In the days that followed, the Cydric capital transformed. Draxier was imprisoned, awaiting judgment from a newly formed council of representatives. The military that had once been focused entirely on conquest was repurposed, with many units dedicated to rebuilding what had been destroyed. Val stood on the balcony of the council chambers, watching the sunset paint the city in hues of gold and crimson. She had discarded her battle armor in favor of simpler attire, still practical, but without the imposing darkness that had once been her signature. Arion joined her, similarly changed. His wounds had healed, and the council had officially recognized him as an ambassador from Earth. "The treaty is signed," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "My superiors can hardly believe it. Peace with the Cydric dynasty seemed impossible just days ago." Val smiled slightly. Much has seemed impossible lately. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city below. "Will you return home?" Val finally asked. "Soon," Arion replied. "There's much to be done, establishing diplomatic relations, cultural exchange programs. The council has asked me to oversee the initial stages." Val nodded, feeling an unexpected relief at his answer. "Good. We could use your perspective." "And you?" Arion asked. "The council offered you leadership of the reformed military." "I haven't decided," Val admitted. "I've been a warrior my entire life. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else." Arion turned to face her directly. "Perhaps you don't need to be something else. Just a different kind of warrior. one who fights for peace rather than conquest. Val considered his words. Is that possible? After everything I've done? The past doesn't define us, Arion said, echoing the sentiment he had expressed in the tunnels days earlier. Our choices now do. Below them, the city lights began to flicker on as darkness spread across the sky. Not the harsh, oppressive illumination of Draxier's reign, but a softer glow that seemed to reflect the changing mood of the capital. You know, Val said thoughtfully, in all my years of combat, all my victories, I never felt as strong as I did when I chose not to kill Draxier. Isn't that strange? Arion smiled. Not strange at all. The greatest strength isn't in destroying what stands against you, but in standing firm for what you believe in, even when it would be easier not to. Val remembered those words, similar to what Arion had said in the arena when he had spared her life. Words that had shattered her armor and her pride in one blow, but had given her something far more valuable in return. I think, she said slowly, I would like to learn more about that kind of strength. In the council chamber behind them, representatives from worlds that had once feared the Sci-Fi dynasty continued their work, drafting peace treaties, establishing trade agreements, rebuilding what had been broken. The beginning of something new. It won't be easy, Arion cautioned. Changing an empire. Changing ourselves. Val straightened, her posture reflecting the determination that had made her a legendary warrior. Few worthwhile things are, she replied. But for the first time, I believe the battle is one worth fighting. As night fell completely over the capital, they remained on the balcony, former enemies now united in purpose, planning not for conquest but for peace. The king's order to break the human spirit had failed in ways no one could have imagined. Instead, it had broken chains, Val's chains of blind loyalty and hollow pride, and the kingdom's chains of tyranny. In their place grew something stronger, understanding, respect, and the promise of a better future forged not through dominance, but through the hardest victory of all, the victory over oneself. The end.